So thanks everybody for being here. I'm really honored to be able to get to be a part of this and present some of the stuff that I think is important. My name is Eric, and I'm a field organizer for the Bernie Sanders campaign. And I'm be talking about community organizing. Dream, plan, act, repeat. So how can you make positive change in your community? Um, so quick agenda. I put probably too much material in this, so I'm going to kind of breeze through it so we can do a little intro, a little bit of context about what is organizing, why it's important, and then the real stuff of how to do it. And they'll have some time for Q&A at the end. And I put this picture up of 8-Ball because everything that I've heard about 8-Ball, it's a really special place. And I'm assuming that most of you who are on here are organizers yourselves already. One of the things that I want to say is, from what I can tell about this community is that the people involved, y'all are leaders already, and if you don't think about yourselves as leaders, I hope that you can start, because I'm sure that people around you look to you for guidance. And I really want y'all to think about yourselves as leaders. You're here for a reason. So I'm going to get into it, who I am. I mentioned that I work for the Bernie Sanders campaign as a field organizer. And the important thing, though, is what motivates me. So why am I here? Oftentimes I tell my story about my experience with a motorcycle accident and being put into medical debt, even though I had health insurance, because a lot of people can relate to that story. But the reality is that our core beliefs and our view on the world are actually formed when we're children with our family. And so for me, I have a really big family. I got half brothers and half sisters, and they have half brothers and half sisters. And my half brother's half brother is this man right here, Tashawn, and we're brothers. We're 6 months apart. We grew up together. We're best friends. But by the time we were in junior high, it became really clear to me that the way that he was being treated and, the resources that he had in his life were very different from mine. My referrals were his suspensions. My suspensions in class was his expulsion. And, he dropped out of school in his freshman year of high school. By the time he was 18, he got picked up for a low-level nonviolent offense and got a year in jail, and ended up spending the rest of his 20s in and out of jail. His life is very different, and he's one of the best people I've ever known. He's an incredible father. He's a super talented artist. He's funny. He's just a good person. But the reality is, he never got the chances that I got, and it really, it hurt me to see him oppressed the way he was. And as I got older, I understood that this is a systemic thing. I witnessed and saw very closely the effects of the school to prison pipeline and what that does to a person, what that does to a family, what that does to a community. And so this is one of the things, my experience with my brother Tashawn has really shaped my beliefs, and it motivates me to participate in this work and make sure that we can be doing everything that we can to change not just specific policies and stuff, but actively try and change the structure and change the system. So I share my story. I'm going to get into stories a little bit later, but hope that if you don't already, you can start thinking about what your experiences are and what motivated you in your life to be here today. All right, so what is organizing? In the very strictest sense, it's coordinating with people. It's getting people together in order to put on an event or take an action. And we all know that the other side, they organize money. They organize big money. And we all know that we have people power, but clearly we've been losing, and we haven't been doing a great job of organizing all these people. So we're going to talk about a little bit of historical context and then talk about how to do it. So this year is the 100-year anniversary of women's right to vote. On the top corner, that's Eugene Debs. He ran for president as a socialist 5 times around the turn of the century, and a lot of people credit his ideas in elevating class consciousness so that when the Great Depression came and immediately afterwards, workers were ready and organized to get things like unemployment insurance that we're so lucky to have today, Social Security and Medicare, overtime pay, child labor laws, the list goes on. We won a lot in around the 30s because of workers organizing. But unfortunately, the language of those laws specifically excluded people of color and women. And so fast forward to the 60s, I'm sure you're all familiar with this story, and this organizing culminated in a lot of things, but specifically the Voting Rights Act of 65 and Civil Rights Act of 64. I included this picture of the breakfast program run by the Black Panther Party because mutual aid and harm reduction are really important aspects of organizing to, help your community in the immediate sense, get tangible results that are going to help people around you right now, today. This is Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street in Zuccotti Park. I included this picture because, it did a lot of things. Again, elevated class consciousness, educated a lot of people on who the real enemy is, but it lacked, and this was on purpose, but it lacked leadership, and it lacked clear goals. And so in a lot of ways, Occupy Wall Street kind of didn't come out with any tangible successes. More recently, the teacher strikes. So this top picture is from 2017 in West Virginia. So the teachers in 2017 had met each other through organizing with the Bernie campaign in 2016. And they learned how to organize, they met each other, and by the time they struck, they had been organizing for months and months. They had near 99% participation, and they had teacher walkouts in all 70-some counties. They struck for less than 2 weeks, and they won pay raises, not just for themselves, but for everybody in the education system. Bus drivers, cafeteria workers, janitors, everybody in lower class sizes. It was a really amazing win. Most recently, this picture below, Moms for Housing in Oakland. Homeless mothers took over vacated houses that are owned by the banks that have been foreclosed. And there's cops here that came to evict them, but they were organized. They had community members come out with press and stuff and kept the mothers in this home, and they're there today. Last one I'll show is Bay Rising, is this top picture, and predominantly people of color organizers organizing in their own community for things like local electoral wins, eviction protections, pay theft protections, and kind of mutual aid, harm reduction stuff. This bottom picture is the Sunrise Movement, probably familiar with. It's predominantly white college kids. One of the things about the Bernie campaign that we did in California that we're really, I think is really profound, is we brought these two groups, we helped bring these two groups together. They met each other and found that they have, common goals. And I really feel like both of these groups on their own and all of us collectively are more powerful because they're now working together and understand that they have shared values and common goals. So everything that I've showed up to this point are examples of direct action in and mutual aid, which, are our best examples of wins. The reality is that we have not won electorally in any big way, in any significant way for like ever. But it's my personal belief that direct action and mutual aid need to be tactics that we use to win electorally, not our main strategy. Because otherwise, we're always going to be on our heels. We're always going to be reacting. Once we start winning electorally, we can change the rules, we can change the laws, and be proactive. So that's why, personally, I think the Bernie campaign has been so important. That's why we have people like Ilhan Omar, AOC, and Rashida Tlaib, who's not pictured, but those examples of electoral win are so important, and they're going to be, they're examples, they're kind of like, they motivate and inspire others that like, hey, we can do this also. Just one example of an electoral win on March 3rd that I like to share. This is Chesa Boudin, who won district attorney in San Francisco. One of the reasons that I think it's important, on his second day on the job, he banned cash bail. So judges can no longer keep people in jail before they've been convicted just because they can't afford bail. So why is all this important? Clearly, y'all are here because you already understand that it's important, but the reality is that not everybody does. And we could give all these like facts and figures about, we got 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's imprisoned population. Like, that is insane, but obviously it's not enough to get people to be involved. So what do? We share our story. Stories are important for a few reasons. The first one is for yourself. This work is hard. It's a sacrifice to show up to meetings and to be organizing. You're not like hanging out with your, hopefully you're hanging out with friends organizing, but you're not like hanging out in the park on a sunny day, or like, doing whatever, like going to music and doing all these things that are fun. It is a sacrifice. And so when you're clear on your own story and you're clear on your own motivation, it's easier for you to dig in and do the work. Secondly, when you are having one-on-ones with other organizers or other supporters who you want to be a volunteer and an organizer with yourself, sharing your story is an important piece of building a relationship. It shows vulnerability, and it opens up an opportunity for you to connect with the other person, and it gets the other person thinking about their own story and what motivates them. And when you understand where the other person is coming from, it's easier to make that connection to the work that you're doing and why it's why it's going to be beneficial to their self-interest to get involved. Thirdly, persuasion. Persuasion is a really important part of any electoral campaign or doing direct action. Getting people who are kind of like on the margins or kind of on the fence of like, I support, but I'm not quite ready to get involved. Sharing your story is the opposite of debating. When people debate, all the research shows that they get put on the defensive. They're coming up with reasons why they're right. And when they walk away from the debate, they're more entrenched in their original beliefs. It actually does the opposite of what we want to do. So instead, sharing your story authentically and genuinely, again, it creates an opening and more possibility of connection. And oftentimes people aren't going to tell you that they've been persuaded in the moment, but all the research shows that, people think about that conversation that you had, a real like shared or, a real lived experience, like a connection on a human level. Sharing your story works. And especially when it helps you get into their story and identify their self-interest and help them become more aware of what is motivating them. So that's why stories are important. It's literally why we do this. It's not because of these facts and figures and stats. It's because of our own experience. So stories are important. So, all right, 10:50. All right. How do we do it? Um, we build power. Power. A lot of people are like power because power is used over us. But if the purpose is clear and the purpose is good, then it's power with, and that's what we want to be building is power with. So we talk about strategy. There's kind of like two aspects to this, and they go hand in hand. But on one side, there's personal connections. And on the other side, there's constituency and base building. There's the Saul Alinsky old model of organizing is personal connections, called small organizing, and then constituency base building is like the big organizing side. And personal connections are a critical piece of this. You want to be doing one-on-ones and connecting with each other in a story, bringing somebody who is a supporter into being an active volunteer. And then constituency and base building, identifying groups who are your natural allies and, going to their events, going to their meetings, making yourself known, creating, building relationships with those people. And then, it's one thing to show up and have, support them in whatever action, getting your group to come over and support actions that allied groups are taking is important. But one of the things that we've learned is that identifying natural leaders is really important. And so natural leaders are not necessarily the person who has the title at the top. It's not necessarily the person who is the most active that comes to every event and speaks up the loudest, but there are always natural leaders within groups, and these are the people who are often reluctant to be leaders, but you can tell, if you show up enough, you can tell who they are. People listen when they start talking. People pay attention, and those are the people that you want to take aside and have a conversation with. Like, let's get together sometime and over lunch or coffee or whatever, and let's have a conversation about this stuff and have that one-to-one and share your story, get to hear their story, connect, identify mutual self-interest and where your motivations kind of combine, and then have the hard ask with them. Like, get them on your side, bring them to being a passive supporter with just in their group, and say, look, we need your support. We need you on our side. We have this stuff that we're working for, and we need you and your group to get involved. And if you get that person, then the whole group is going to come with them, and it's not just a one-time thing. Like, organizing is about following up. You're constantly creating and fostering relationships. You're always checking in with people. You're always following up. So I mentioned this earlier about mutual aid and direct action. It's really important to have small wins to build momentum, to win allies, to gain visibility, and people in the community and different communities see what you're doing and that you're winning tangible results for people around you. So elements of the process, you have one-on-ones, your personal relationships, and you pretty much always, like, depending on the relationship and where you're at and where the person is at, you pretty much always want to have an invitation or an ask. Come to this meeting. Hey, we're having this action. At the end of the conversation, you're asking something of this person. You want to get them involved. You have something specific that they can do to help you. And then after the meeting or the action, it's always important to evaluate with your team. How did that go? What about it can be done better? And what do we do next time? And then it continues. You want to be following up with the people that you're close to. You always want to be following up with new people that you've met, um, and getting people involved. Um, there's always lots of meetings, and one of those things, there's a few things about meetings that are really important. Always respect and value people's time. None of us have enough time. We're working, we're taking care of life. It's hard to be involved. So always be respectful. Be on time, end the meeting on time. Um, importance of agenda. I'm sure you've been to meetings that seem like they don't get anything done, or they're kind of all over the place. Always have an agenda. And some examples of a good agenda are, I just realized that it's already 10:56. I'm doing the thing I said not to do, but I'm getting there. Bring people from other communities and organizations to be like guest speaker, give people a platform, get them involved, have report backs from working groups, and talk about actions from the previous week or whatever. And then discuss strategy and tactics. That usually takes the longest, but it's really important. What are we doing next? How are we doing it? And then always make sure that people leave with a job. Okay, this is what we're doing. Who's bottom lining that? Who's going to keep them accountable? What is everybody in the room doing? Make sure that everybody's got a job. And then do something fun afterwards. Every DSA meeting that I've been to in every city that I've been to, they go out for food and drinks afterwards. It's about building community, building relationships. Like that really is what this is all about, All right, so the hard ask is a tool that is really important to be good at, because that's pretty much what we're doing all the time. Is we're asking people to sacrifice their time and energy to come work on whatever it is we're asking them to work on. So being good at this is valuable. A few of the aspects of it are be upfront and direct. Like, there's a purpose for your conversation. Don't beat around the bush. Be straight up like, hey, I'm calling because I got this event coming up and it would be really great to see you there. Give all the details. Be specific so they don't have to be asking any questions. Like, it's on Saturday at 2:00. It's at the community center downtown, and it's going to be 2 hours. We're doing a phone bank. It's going to be really great. There's going to be somebody there to train you, blah, blah, blah. Clear language. Avoid saying things like, do you think you can make it? Or do you have time to do this? Or would you be willing to? Use clear language. Like, can we count on you to be there? Can you make it? Will I see you there? And then lean into the silence. After you ask that question, most of the time there's going to be hesitation. Just sit, lean into the silence, wait for them to answer. And then follow up. Following up is so important. Confirmation calls, reminders. Don't let people think that you forgot about them. Remind people that you're thinking about them and you're counting on them to be there. So those are some elements of the ask. Let's see. Okay, we started at 10:35, so I've got 5 minutes left. This is not a specific graphic. I couldn't find a great graphic for it, but one of the things that is so important about organizing is what we refer to as a ladder of engagement. And I've seen it a lot in like social media stuff, but it's a really simple principle of your role as an organizer is to be duplicating yourself. You want to be replicating yourself with everybody that you come into contact with. If you're the only person that can do what you can do, you're basically failed as an organizer. You want to be leveling people up, giving people increased responsibility. And one of the things that I think is really critical about this, especially in a volunteer-run organization, is have trust and faith in people that they are capable and that they can learn. And people are going to make mistakes, and that's okay, but they will learn from their mistakes. And when people take on some increased responsibility and they see that they can do it, oftentimes there is a really amazing growth that happens, and people gain confidence in themselves. And you're not only helping that person become a more full expression of what they can be, you're helping the whole community. And so some like concrete example of this, like I'll use the Bernie field example, is one of our lowest level asks is come to a phone bank. You know, you don't really need to have a whole lot of experience or training to do it. Anybody can show up and come to a phone bank. So you get somebody who's a supporter or maybe never volunteered before, they come to a phone bank, and then they do it a couple times. They get them to come back. Once they've done it a couple times, all right, now they're like familiar with the technology. They are comfortable on the phone. They know how to talk to people about Bernie. Now that they're an experienced volunteer. And so the next thing that you do is, like, say I was the host of the phone bank. I'll be like, hey, I see you've been coming a bunch and you're experienced now. Can you show up a little bit early next time and help me train new people? We've got some new people that come in. They've never done it before. I know you're good at this. Can you train them? And then they do that once or twice. And then you can say, hey, can you help me host this time? I'm going to be on the dialer myself. I'm going to be hanging out. I'll be available for any questions that come up, but I'd really love if you could host this time. And now they're in charge, and they have the experience of being the person who is managing everything. And then this allows you to either, they can go start their own, or you can go start your own. And so now you have duplicated yourself, and you have somebody who has all the experience and resources and tools necessary to run that thing on their own. And that sort of ladder of engagement can be applied to anything that you're doing. But the idea is to be identifying people who are dedicated and committed, and making sure that they have opportunities to take on more responsibility and kind of like organize yourself out of a job so that you can go off and do something else. Cool. So this would not be a proper organizing presentation without an invitation to some events that we got going on. As we are all experiencing, everything is virtual now, which is kind of weird, but you know, we're doing it. So I need to figure out how to drop the links into a chat box, which I think I can do. But basically, so the virtual house party is kind of like a sort of an introduction with people who live in your area by Bernie staff members who are talking about our new strategy, how we organize in this virtual reality, our virtual world, and the actions that you can take as a volunteer right now. It's basically phone banking and using the Burn app, but they go through about like why they're important, and because they're actually pretty powerful, especially in the current situation that we're in. Let's see. And then virtual phone bank. So I'm going to drop these links in the chat box if I figure it out in a second. But we're basically phone banking every day of the week. And if you click on the link that I'm going to drop in, there's options to sign up for the shift that works best for you. And with that, I am done with my presentation. So if anybody has any questions, which I hope you do, I would love to hear them. Okay, this one is for the virtual phone bank.
I wanted to ask I'm gonna start with a question, so at least we have some. I wanted to know, like, what are you guys doing now that, like, everything, yeah, as you said, it's like frozen or gone virtual, and I mean also the fact that the entire like election right now feels like who knows when and how it's gonna happen. I just wonder how you'll working on that.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about. I was hoping that question. Thanks for asking that question. You know, I am still staff, and this is what I'm doing. I wanted to talk about organizing in general, but okay. So,
I mean, you don't need to talk about it if you prefer to, like, just go.
No. I want to talk about it for sure. So there's a couple things. I'll give a little bit of like a background kind of pitch of why we're still involved, and then also what our strategy is moving forward. So, because it's difficult, right? Like numerically, we're way down. Mathematically, there is a possibility of winning, but the pathway to victory is narrow. You know, it's an uphill battle for sure. But there's two things that I think are important to think about. One is like, you know, it's a bit of a Hail Mary, but the reality, like if coronavirus has taught us anything, it's that anything can and will happen. This world is very uncertain, and elections can change on a dime. You know, Biden is like losing his mental faculty. There is definitely a possibility of him making some sort of mistake that he can't walk back from. If we're not organizing at full tilt and we're not prepared to seize on that opportunity when it presents itself, you know, we could have lost on the biggest opportunity in our lifetimes in terms of winning the presidency. So we need to be prepared for that potential. Secondly, and you know, there's 40% of the delegates are still remaining. Like I said, it's an uphill battle, but like New York, for example, has the most delegates of any state remaining. We can win big in New York, and there's definitely still a possibility. But the other thing is that, you know, Bernie didn't win in 2016. He didn't win the nomination, but nobody can deny that the national conversation has changed because of the campaign that he ran and the you know, the policies that he championed and made sure that they're in the national forefront. And the campaign in general has grown and changed exponentially since then. It's a more intersectional and more comprehensive campaign plan with all these different policies, from immigration to criminal justice reform to the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, obviously. And if we quit right now, it basically delegitimizes everything that we've been working for. The centrist neoliberals will say, oh, look, he didn't have enough support for his ideas, which is not true. You know, so it is actually our responsibility to make sure that we have significant wins in the remaining states and take this all the way to the convention and prove that there is demand for what Bernie is asking for. So I know that it's not the like most motivating thing to say that, like, yeah, we can win, you know, and it's like, but this campaign always has been about not just Bernie. It's about us. It's about the policies. It's about the people that we're fighting for, and this is part of it. You know, so and like an example with the $2 trillion stimulus bill that just got passed, Bernie was able to get some amendments in around, you know, who is covered on unemployment insurance that would not have been included otherwise. because of his platform and his level right now running for president. So, and the last thing I'll say is like, he's not giving up, and so who am I to give up? You know, this man has been fighting forever, and you know, I'm sticking with him. So that's the kind of pitch about it, and then I'll go into what we're doing in terms of strategy. You know, New York primary thankfully got pushed back to June 23rd, I believe, just yesterday. So we are basically we're doing two things. We're phone banking, and we're using the Burn app, which is essentially phone banking also, but it's talking to people we don't know on the dialer, cold calling people that may or may not be Bernie supporters, having conversations about Bernie, you know, doing persuasion, but also just like check-ins about how people are doing, and educating on voting information. And then the other is talking to people that we do know. And the Burn app is actually pretty revolutionary in that it allows us to, we import our contacts, our friends into the Burn app. The campaign doesn't get any of that information. What it does do is checks your friend's name against the public voter file, and it lets you know if A, are they registered to vote, and B, as we get closer to election day, it checks with the Board of Elections office and sees if they've voted already or not. So at first, it's like sort of a kind of motivating factor for you to pick up the phone. Like, are they a Bernie supporter? A lot of people you'll know, but not everybody will. And people that you don't know is like, hey, get on the phone and call your friend or the person that's in your contact list that maybe you haven't talked to in 5 years, and have that conversation with them just the way that you would on the Bernie dialer. You know, talk to them, be like, hey, it's been a long time. I want to check in. How are you doing? You know, I want to let you know that I've been volunteering for the Bernie campaign, and I just want to check in with you. Like, do you know who you're going to be voting for? You know, have that conversation with your friend, because all the research shows that friend to friend, like people that you know, conversations are the most effective. So that's more or less what we're doing. People were stuck inside. We can't go meet each other. We can't go door knocking. So we're just on the phone like as much as humanly possible.
Thank you. I think that this is still like useful on a larger scale, not necessarily on the Bernie specific. I think in general it's important to have those things. So like if something happens like what's happening now, to keep finding ways of reaching out to people. And even the fact that like even if, let's say in this case, Bernie wasn't going to win, there's still a lot of wins that come with it. And so like I think as a general understanding of like when you want to be organized, I think those are important points, I think, for any sort of organizing that someone does, to understand that like sometimes a loss isn't necessarily a loss. And
Totally. It's frustrating sometimes, but it's a long haul, you know, and we got to be in it for the long haul, because we're not going anywhere and they aren't going anywhere. The game is still going to be played. So we might as well stay involved and get what we can.
Can I say something?
Please.
I think in terms of like thinking about the idea of like spreading ideas or whatever, disseminating these ideas and engagement, it's really interesting to look at something like a virus where it has a rate at which it is infectious, or like I think it's called an RO rate. How many people become infected from each individual infection. So I think like the idea of multiplying yourself or multiplying your vote, multiplying your impact, like if you only infect, so to speak, 2 other people, it grows exponentially. And so I think like the idea, like I always used to participate just for myself. Therefore, like in a lot of ways, I was stopping the buck by just voting. And so now like I'm kind of understanding that, first of all, being a good community member and having credibility with people you know is so important. It's the highest. It's like the most valuable thing. And then also, yeah, just spreading. Okay, I'm unmuting. I'm muting.
Cool. Thanks, Sonia. That's an interesting analogy, and I think it's true. It's totally true.
I just have some questions maybe about more kind of like modern organizing tactics. Like in your organizing section, you talked a lot about like after Bernie's 2016 election, we saw like the teacher strikes of like 2017. And then obviously in the last couple of months, we've seen like Moms for Housing. And I know there's especially some people that I've met in the city that occupied around, like organized around Occupy. Social media was kind of in its infancy. Now we're kind of in this position where we have all of these amplification tools that, I mean, like even like Zoom, it has become like this really crazy like multimedia platform for so many different types of expression that I've seen in my own community. Is there anything that you've noticed as of recently outside of just kind of like virtual hangouts and stuff like that that's been beneficial to like canvassing and like kind of amplifying messages under kind of the Bernie umbrella?
Totally. Yeah. Thanks, Mason. Let's see. First, in 2016, we used Facebook a ton. But to me, social media is a promotion tool. A lot of people rely really heavily on social media, and it is really powerful, but nothing replaces, face-to-face conversations, or this day, like on the phone or Zoom conversations. So they're more personal, but they're a promotion tool. They're also a tool to like circumnavigate traditional media, which is really important. So one thing that I think is interesting, we used events on Facebook a lot to, you can set a day, time, location, and invite people to it. And it's a really useful tool to get people to remember, put on their calendar and and promote. Something that we found since then, like young people don't use Facebook anymore. And it's, boomers use Facebook, which is kind of interesting. So it's still a useful tool in that. But Instagram has really taken over. In Santa Cruz, where I'm from, there's a grad student wildcat strike, and they used Instagram extensively, like memes and just to like get their message across, but also to like promote within their community about like events that were coming up. Hey, this meeting is coming up. Hey, this strike is coming up. And it was really useful. So in my opinion, social media is like absolutely necessary to use. I think it's a tool for promotion. You need to have somebody that, like, if you have an organization, having at least one or a couple people who are managing social media accounts that can get your message out, and always have, there's a balance between calls to action and just like fun stuff
Right.
that people can engage with.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely the point of it is recruitment.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess maybe this is less of a question, more of an observation, is like I see like a lot of campaigns working successfully on Instagram and Twitter just because of the immediacy. That sort of traction I don't see kind of moving towards kind of like communities, like more kind of like family, or like, I mean, I moved here from Michigan, from New York, so it's like trying to get in touch and in tap with kind of like this instant communication is a little bit more difficult on like Facebook, just because of the way people use it differently. So
Yeah.
I'm really interested right now in kind of how I can, as being in this position of being between kind of two generations on these platforms, just kind of bridging the gap between keeping people as educated, keeping my like family and like family friends as educated on political, like kind of current kind of political actions as my friends that are on Twitter and Instagram are. So
Totally.
yeah,
It's interesting that you're right. The two platforms are
not a
used
lot of
differently,
overlap.
and one is immediate. And like we used to with Facebook, we would be like, you have to plan out like a week and a half to 2 weeks at least to be able to get like the right promotion. But these days with Twitter and Instagram, like you can plan something the next day or 2 days out and like blast it out, and people are like, they're there, they got it, and they're down.
Yeah, but it's like, it makes me think of like in Japan, there's like this obsession with flyers, but nobody attends the actual events. And I feel like we really need to have a movement towards, I mean, it's funny given the circumstances now, but towards like more actual physical being together and contact, and like act like real life community formation. Cause there's like a balance between like saying shit online. It's like there's a lot of, I know this because I work in fashion, where you can have someone who has like a really high visibility, wear your clothes and post about it, and you won't make a single sale. But people who are like in your community wearing your clothes, that has more profound traction. So I don't know. It's like,
Yeah,
I really want to commune more.
that's why I think that social media is a tool that needs to be used, but nothing replaces, like, there's a hierarchy of effectiveness in terms of the effectiveness of an ask. And the best thing is a friend asking another friend face to face. Like, that's the most effective way to get somebody to turn out. The next thing is a friend to another friend on the phone. The next thing is a friend to another friend on like social media or like email. I don't know, maybe not email so much, but like a social media ask, like on a direct message or something. And then you move from friend to friend to like a volunteer to another volunteer that maybe they don't know each other, or a volunteer to a stranger. And it follows the same pattern. Face to face is always the most effective. The conversation on the phone is the next most effective. And then like social media, or social media would be the next. And then, an email blast, if you have like a list of a couple thousand people or a couple hundred people or whatever, like that's sort of it's a promotion tool, but it's not super effective. The flyers are a really important like promotion tool to have visibility, but like you can, like Sonia was saying, you can have awesome flyers up in all the right places, but nobody might not show up if you don't have like, people aren't talking about it to each other in person. You don't have somebody like, one the phone banks that we do in the Bernie campaign, we do volunteer recruitment calls, and experienced phone bankers, we get them together in a group the day before the event or 2 days before the event, and they go through the list of people who have RSVP'd, and they do confirmation calls. Hey, thanks so much for signing up. I'm really excited to see you on Saturday. You're going to be there, right? And then they do recruitment calls to people who are on the general list and say, do that ask. Like, hey, I'm calling because we got this event coming up. Here's the details. Can you make it? And there is a very clear correlation in the attendance of events that have done recruitment phone calls and have done confirmation calls and those that haven't. It's like very obvious. And so having a contact list and having people who are, one of their jobs is to call through that contact list and invite people. Or on the other hand, you can just, you got a small group of people. You can be like, hey, each one of your jobs today is to go home, or we can do it right now in the meeting. Set aside 20 minutes. We're each going to go through 10 to 20 of our contacts, and we're going to call them. We're not going to text them. We're going to pick up the phone and call them. And if they don't answer, then you text them with all the details. This is what's up. But like nothing replaces face-to-face ask or at least a phone call.
Hi. Thank
Hi
you
there.
for that. That was super useful. Can I ask a question that's sort of similar in terms, but it's more about like values, or how do you actually like bridge those intergenerational gaps, but like from the heart in a way? Like I'm from Chile, and the difference with boomers, it's like they don't. You need to have conversations with them that go like from the broad spectrum, from like, decolonization and like animal rights, and it's stuff that, because my country is so like authoritarian historically, people don't believe in movements that have no leader. But that's what's going on right now. So it's interesting because conversations and movement and what's going on there now becomes like so polarizing, and it's like it's very hard to get older people interested or in tune, or like find any legitimacy in what's going on right now. So yeah, I like your thoughts on that, because the Bernie campaign for me is effective at doing exactly that. It's like, yeah, it's these radical ideas that, I don't know, even
Totally.
7 years ago were unthought of on a massive scale.
Yeah. Is it Michaela?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Michaela. I don't have a great answer for that. I don't know all the time, but let's see, first in my own experience, a lot of people generalize boomers here, which, tends to be true. But what I've seen in the Bernie campaign is a lot of our most dedicated volunteers are from that generation. And so there are people out there that, I'm not totally sure what it is that divides people up, but I think it's just like how they were raised and experiences from when they were children. It's really hard to persuade people, especially at that age, that are so entrenched in their beliefs. But I mean, the thing that we've been taught in the Bernie campaign, which I have seen work the best, which I really do believe in, is really sticking to your own story and your own experience, and trying not to get into debates about like, oh, well, you should think this way because like look at what's going on around us and stuff, and speaking in like kind of abstracts, and speaking in like, this is what I went through, or like I know my friend's story and this is what they went through, and this is why it's connected to what's going on. And then also, usually starting with that to kind of open it up, but always like every person is different and every person's concern is different. And so getting clear on what that person's motivation is and what's important to them is definitely the first step. Understanding what they care about, and then kind of digging into that and like validating their concern. I hear where you're coming from. I understand that is important to you. I get it because of this and this and this, but connecting what they've been through back to the broader picture. and try not to debate. I wish I had a better answer for that. I really don't.
No, it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
It's
Yeah,
it's hard,
yeah,
you know.
one-on-one, and yeah.
And honestly, this is actually, I have a question, like, and I don't expect anybody to have an answer, but it's something that one of the biggest challenges that I've come across time and time again. I hear people who have opposing viewpoints share their own story, and it's the one of, well, I came from nothing, or I worked so hard my whole life, and why can't other people work hard? Like, if I could do it, then why didn't other people do it? And to me, it's really clear, like, oh, you had different circumstances in your life, and you got lucky, and not everybody had the same situation that you had. Aren't you lucky to be where you are today? But I I swear I hear it so often with the people that are most difficult to talk to. And I don't really know how to, I've never been able to get somebody with that attitude to like see a different perspective. Some people you're just not going to win. And it's more about what we do in the Bernie campaign is actually not try and engage and persuade those people, but we try and go to the people who haven't been involved, who've been disenfranchised and disengaged for a number of very valid reasons, but the goal is to activate those people and engage with them who have been left out forever.
I think first of all, thank you all on these, because I think that one thing that I learned is that all of this is very much at the base. All this system that you, Eric, have been talking about, it's very much at the base of popular education, which I believe is something that started in Chile, or at least somewhere, definitely started in South America, which starts from people's experience, and then it goes in a spiral way, in the way that you showed us today. But one thing that I like, that concerns me, is that I understand saying we avoid going to those people because they won't change their mind. But what if those people are like in your house, your family, or people close to you? That's kind of when it gets tricky, because you want to get to a place where like you get to like a meeting point somehow. You want to get to connect with them, and when that connection is missed out, it's just such a struggle. I just wonder whether you have like any sort of insight in that.
You know, I don't. All I'll say is that in my personal experience, the only thing that I've been able to do is do my best to practice patience and understanding, and do my best to have discussions and keep it at discussion level and not let it get to argument level. And if it does, stop and say something along the lines of like, look, I can see that we disagree on this, but at the end of the day, we agree on so much, and we're friends and we love each other, and like, you know, we can share food and we can share laughs and we can do other things. And just, I hate to say it, but there is a point in my experience that I've gotten to where I'm like, I can't have this conversation anymore. It's going to go down a path that maybe we can't come back from, or it's going to be hard to dig ourselves out of, and like try and keep it so that when you leave that conversation and you come back to like, okay, we're friends, that you can have a conversation like that again in the future. And don't let it get to a place where it's like so much that you're like, fuck you, I don't know if that's great advice, but
No,
that's what
definitely.
I've had.
Thank you. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Any last burning questions before we wrap it up? All good. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for having me